Hi guys, my name is Dan Alcorn and we are revisiting the overhead press for this month's programming. What we're going to focus on today is a diagnostic tool to see if you have the mobility to properly overhead press, and after you determine that, some techniques to perfect your overhead press so that you don't lead yourself to any injuries down the road. Alright, I'm here with Greg Askew, one of our newest CrossFit members and a fellow PT, and we're going to go over a diagnostic tool to tell if you do have the overhead mobility to do a successful overhead press. And so what I'm going to have Greg do is he's going to gently squeeze his butt to set his pelvis in a neutral position. We don't want him arched too far forward or tilted too far back, so he's going to find the mid-range between that. Then from this position, he's going to set his ribs so that everything is in neutral here, and then we're going to bring both of his arms overhead. Bring them overhead together. In this position, he should be able to easily get his arms flat to the ground, keeping this nice neutral posture throughout his spine. What we don't want to see is you having to arch yourself to get to the ground. If this is the case, what you might want to look into doing is some thoracic mobility techniques, either using the double lacrosse ball or the foam roll. Another area you can get into is your big lat muscles on the side here that tend to restrict your overhead motion, and anything along the back of the arm. So if you can't get into this nice overhead posture, keeping your rib cage down and your butt squeezed, you'll want to refer back to that. Okay, so we're going to start with the setup. You have to have a proper setup to initiate a good push. And we're going to start with a couple cues, starting at the feet, working our way up to the torso, and then lastly ending at the shoulders. So what Greg's going to do is he's going to firmly plant his feet on the ground, thinking of his foot as a tripod. And those 3 points are going to be the big toe knuckle, the pinky toe knuckle, and then the heel. He's going to evenly disperse his weight between those 3 points. After he's done that, he's going to screw his feet into the ground to give him a stable base. What this effectively does is creates an arch in his foot, which is his load-bearing surface in his foot. Once he's done that, he's going to move up to his hips and pelvis, and he's going to set his pelvis by squeezing his butt. Butt squeeze and pelvis is in neutral. Next, he's going to work up to his torso. In order to keep his torso in neutral, he's going to bring his rib cage down by squeezing his abs. Essentially what he wants to think about is that his torso is like a Coke can. He wants to have stiffness all the way around from the front to the back and the sides. So essentially if I were to try to come up and punch Greg in the stomach, punch him out on the sides, or punch him in the back, he should be stiff all the way around. Alright, the last thing that we're going to cue is his rack position. For this position, we want to make sure that his elbows are slightly in front of the bar. The way he's going to achieve this position is by engaging the muscles of his shoulder blades, squeezing them down and back together to create a shelf for the bar. In this position, we want to make sure that his wrists are as close to neutral as possible so that he can drive from a good position instead of from a broken position. The last thing that we want to look for is that his head and neck are in a good position, one that his head isn't too far out in front of his chest, and one that is not jammed back into the back. So we want it in a nice knotted position like that. Now he's in a good starting position to drive the bar up. Now that we've achieved our stable rack position, we're going to start pressing. The most common things that we'll see in an overhead press will be compensations where the lifter goes out onto the front of their foot and hyperextends from either their lumbar spine or their thoracic spine. Also what we'll see is not finishing the lift by locking your arms completely out and pushing your head through the open arms. So what we want to do is we want to cue to correct these things. In order to correct for these movement flaws, we're going to refer back to his starting position. Greg's going to center himself over the tripod of his foot, which is essentially going to put him over the middle of his foot. From here he's going to screw his feet into the ground. He's going to turn his butt on to set his pelvis, and then he's going to regain his stiffness through his trunk, creating that Coke can of stiffness all the way around. From this position, he's going to drive his arms straight up to the ceiling and lock his arms out completely and push his head through the window. Alright, to conclude, we're going to use the overhead position as your diagnostic tool to see if you have enough mobility to press overhead. You want to make sure that your butt is squeezed tight, your rib cage is down with your abs engaged, and you want to be able to safely get your arms completely overhead, either to the wall or to the ground, without feeling any pinching in your shoulders, without feeling any arching through your back. If you do not have that position, you want to refer back to the July techniques for mobility through the thoracic spine, work on foam rolling techniques for the muscles in the back, or especially go to yoga, because what they're going to do is they're going to teach you how to stabilize your core in addition to working on these mobility deficits. Once you have achieved this, you want to make sure that your setup position is stable through your feet, through your hips, through your trunk, and through your shoulders. This is going to start as your initiation phase of your push, and you're going to maintain this the entire way through the movement.